Okay, we're being recorded now. Oh, you can keep going then. Okay. Can you send me a link because I haven't seen this.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I started recording because I think it's a very interesting topic, and yeah, I'm very happy that we are picking up actually at this point. So it was a conversation about K-Labs. So these two guys, they just have been featured in the Y Combinator, right? Um, and so this is about two guys that are starting their own startup,
Mhm.
trying to build an open source humanoid. And within our chat, the three of us, a few days or last week, we spoke, or you, Trent, spoke about why reinventing the wheel, right? And so when I saw the post from these guys, I immediately jumped into in the conversation, and I tagged you, Trent, to maybe elaborating why you think it might be not necessary, not necessary to reinvent the wheel, and yeah, maybe we can just jump in. Maybe you can
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
back
It's an
with your
interesting
idea.
topic. And yeah, I mean, the first thing I said, which I do believe is true, is like, I'm one of the last people in the world you want to come to be told to not build something, right? Because I'm the first person to go in. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's figure out how to do this and stuff. But when I reflect on that, like whatever it is, however many years into the journey now between hardware and software and everything else like that, in a lot of cases, that might not have been the right intuition, or at least you need to stop and look at what's been done before you and see if there's something that you can either base your work on or contribute to. I think sometimes we get really excited about the build and the prospect and stuff like that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's okay to do that as well and be like, look, I'm just really excited about doing this. I want to replicate this work, where I feel like I have a new angle on something, and I want to do it. And my contribution is going to be to go through that effort and document it and share it and stuff, and that's completely valid. But where I get a little worried, and it's kind of the founder excitement sort of thing, is when words like we're the first to do this, or we're going to build the first whatever, or that type of sort of marketing or verbiage comes into play, I'm like, well, it's really actually unlikely that we're ever the first. And honestly, if we think we're the first, that might be a sign, or it might be a dangerous sign on its own, because that means that maybe you didn't look at all the other projects, or you don't have a notion of what's already been done, or at very least, I would argue you're maybe being a little bit disrespectful to those projects. And so that's sort of my take on it. I think, of course, everybody's free to do any work that they are interested in. But the question marks for me come into play when you look at the kind of state of it, and you're like, yeah, but there are similar projects. There are things that you could contribute to. There are things that you could reference. There are things you could build upon. In some ways, likely you are, even without knowing it. So yeah, that's kind of my take.
I mean, there's a few projects, right, that are doing open source, maybe not necessarily humanoids, but different kind of open source robotics, right? And so I think at least I think the one I know, and I hope you guys can help me fill up the lists. But there's Pollen, right?
Yep.
Um, then there is
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we've seen Rob's been at this longer than I have, but even in my time, I think I've seen, In Move, Poppy, Pollen, Ricci, the stuff from
Yes.
Robotics, the Thorman, Thorman G, or however you pronounce it. I've probably seen 10 of these projects, and I'm not the deepest in terms of history on it, definitely.
Just last week, I spoke to someone from the Silicon Valley, because I saw a post from them, and they're working on a humanoid as well. I think they call it Mona, and they were showing the garage. They were building it within their build, and so I gave him a call, or I wrote him an email, and then we had a call last week, and so it's a German guy, and so but he's living in the US for over a decade now, and they said that, and he told me that that he's working on this project for a few years now. They did a little bit of raising last year, and they're just in the middle of raising this year, I think it is. Kind Humanoid, I think it's is the name of the company. And yeah, it was a 30-minute call. I think we did 40 minutes, and I had to go, he had to go, and so I think we need to catch up. But the point is, as you said, Trent, you're very, very unlikely being the first person doing something, right? And there's a lot of other projects, and as you said, there's nothing wrong in doing your own stuff and do your own learnings. I think this was your comment. There's a lot of value in it and a lot of learning they can do when you start with a project, but not everything needs to be done from the very first step from scratch, right? There's so many things that you can build on, and there needs to be a very good reason why you are not building upon other things. And sometimes it is because there is a reason. Things are not working out very well, but I think that there's also the part of, as you said, I have not looked too much into other things. I'm a very young, maybe founder, and I have the idea and the inspiration and even maybe even the ego to start something, right? And I think this is because, I mean, Rob, you've been in the business for much longer than I did, and you built hundreds and thousands of robots, and you're in the middle of building a
I've built
humanoid
dozens of
open source humanoid robot as well. So I do think that you have plenty to say about where do you start, what you're taking from other builders and engineers, and yeah, I would like to hear your thoughts.
From my perspective, it's always stopped when it gets to needing more sophisticated control. I've literally got storage units with robots just lined up waiting to have more sophisticated control put onto them, and that was always a kind of glass ceiling. But the difference between getting a robot to do a fairly simple task reliably and getting it to do a slightly more complex task reliably is enormous. It's hard to appreciate just how difficult things become, how quickly things become difficult when you start building up the complexity. And so you're going to need these much more. It always feels like a bit like a sledgehammer, kind of crushing a nut kind of thing. But we're going to apply huge amounts of computing force to get them to do what appears to be very simple tasks. And that's the stage I've been waiting for it to get to. There's always arguments about actuators, but I'm not convinced that that's ever really been the bottleneck. As long as you can get reasonable power to weight, as long as you get reasonable control, as long as you just need, it's got to move around in space and get towards things and put hands or grippers around things. But stringing that all together and producing something useful has just always been beyond the state of the art.
I'm not 100% sure if you have seen this, but well, let's start it the other way around. I mean, last year I think was one of the breakthrough years for AI for the mainstream media, right? Mm-hmm. So all those AI tools you can see, text to video, and yeah, all the other ones. ChatGPT was just released 2 months before that, right? So I think it was November 2022. And so yeah, last year was the big breakthrough, and this year I think not a week goes by that a big company is putting out something about humanoids, and I was speaking about this earlier. And just a few weeks ago, I saw a new player entering the game. You heard about Hugging Face. They are very big into large language models or NLP in general, and I mean, what open source has it as an advantage to companies is you have so much more work power, right? So I mean, obviously, if you have a lot of money, you can acquire the best people in the world, right? And all the students would love to work for Google, for Meta, for all these kind of companies, right? And now with the big players as Tesla or Figure, there's even more opportunities to work, right? But with open source, I think the growth can be exponentially, and I think here open source can have an advantage, especially in the future when things are coming together. Hugging Face is a platform where people can build with existing tools, and yeah, being a platform is, I think, from a money perspective, if you're doing this right and you being able to make money out of it for a longer period of time. I think this is the golden dream of being in a position, because you don't need to build the entire time yourself and come up with ideas, right? You are selling the shovel, basically, right, for all those gold diggers. And so I would like to hear from you guys. What do you think now, as more players entering the game of open source robotics? Do you think hardware will prevent these guys from playing with big players as Figure, who just raised 675 million, or Tesla, that has a lot of money, and is being able, or where Elon is being known to find people investing in them, right? Because hardware is still very hard, very complex, very, very cost intensive. And with open source, you do 3D printing, but as you mentioned, Rob, there's a lot of things you cannot print, right? So there's sensors and gears and all these things that you can just not print. So you do need to buy them. And this is where you said, if you don't want the humanoid just standing there and do nothing versus moving, and yeah, I would like to hear you guys' thoughts on that.
Who's going first?
Go for it, Rob. Yeah.
Sure. So I'm the optimistic one, and then Trent can be the pessimistic one afterwards, I guess. There is this question now as to whether or not the software is going to solve these problems, or we're going to end up with a repeat of where we got to before, where it's nice but it can't quite do the whole thing. The demo which convinced me was done by Agility back in, was it last March or May even? And they were the first ones I saw that used an LLM to solve a very general task description. And they told it, clean up this mess. And it had some basic movement primitives. It could move around, it could pick things up. But from that single instruction, it took them about 2 weeks to write the prompts, which allowed it to essentially clean up. And it's remarkably similar, in my opinion, to the Figure demo, which raised that enormous 675 million. It's kind of it's the same principle. So there was always this issue that you could build your robots, you could get them very capable, but you still then had this massive problem of how do you explain to them what a mess is, what a room is, what all this stuff is. And LLMs seem to just kind of solve that whole problem. Whether or not they do it well enough is something that I think will become a very active area of investigation. And that's what I want to get to. I want to make that active experiment happen. I want to provide people with the hardware and work with people like Hugging Face, and they put the software on, and then you've got this platform. And as you say, you don't directly compete with these companies that are going to produce this fully finished, fully polished system. You get something out to people and they experiment with it. And I think there's real potential there. Whether or not it will go all the way, as it were, and that becomes a system which can hold its own against fully commercial developments, I mean, who knows? But it's you can picture it a bit like Linux versus other operating systems. That there's clearly room for both. So I think you'll end up with very polished commercial systems, and you'll also have very open systems, and that seems quite a healthy ecosystem to me. So that's what I think is going to happen. That's what I'd like to make happen, Robert. What about you, Trent?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, yeah, I agree with all that. I think so in my mind lately, I've really been thinking like that, and Rob mentioned this earlier too, is that really it's a software problem. Like I think if the question is, are these companies going to be limited by hardware, or will there be hardware that, gives, say, the large companies an advantage or something like that? Possibly. I don't think that's the limit right now, though. And that's why I'm also a little skeptical on sort of, new iterations on hardware, because I think the hardware has been around for a while. We've been challenged to find a way to control it properly and to drive it, in an intelligent manner. And now the question mark is whether sort of the current wave of AI is the solution to that or not. But my opinion would be that you can answer that question. I would almost try to answer it from first principles, which is like forget about the humanoid. Like, let's just talk about, I'd love to see a demo of, here's a UR3 with a 2-finger gripper on it, and I can give it, a task. I can give it a pile of blocks. I can give it a pile of items, all that kind of stuff. and I can just converse with it and ask it to solve a problem. Hey, I'd like you to, arrange these blocks so they look like a butterfly. I'd like you to sort these items by color. I'd like you to sort these items by weight, that type of thing. And literally, I mean, we've had little demos of these types of things over the past couple of decades, and some people might argue it's a solved problem, but I would argue you cannot do that today in a general manner with the AI and the controls that we have, right? And so to me, that's the puzzling part. I'm like, if this is all going to work, by now, you should be able to throw a box of Lego in front of a UR3 and have it build you a house. But we're not even like remotely near that. And so I think, will the hardware limit the big companies and people from doing this? It'll limit them from trying to solve all the problems at the same time and having a humanoid that runs around and builds cars. But that's probably not where this is going to start, or where we're going to start to see the real solutions to this stuff and the problem solving and task planning and stuff like that. So I don't think anybody's encumbered by not having hardware like that.
Well, but hobby level, if people want to experiment in their garages, I think there is a bit of a shortfall of affordable hardware there.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, and that's maybe a good question for everybody too, is like, what do we think? There's an interesting question about the definition of affordable, right? And that's the one that I personally always trip up on that one, because I look at it and I'm like, damn, well, if I'm planning on investing the next 2 years to like, have a robot build Duplo houses or something, what's my time worth? What's the robot gonna cost to do that? And so if I had to go buy a UR3, or I had to buy a Widow X or whatever, and it costs me 10, 20, 30 grand, to me, that's already affordable. But I would acknowledge that that's not maybe garage tinkerer affordable. So it's kind of an interesting question.
That came out with Aloha, I think, because that's 30 grand. There's a bill of materials. Aloha you can do amazing things with. And that was clearly too expensive, because that has not become very widely. That's everything, right? That's open source, open software, open designs, off-the-shelf arms, put it together, and you've got a state-of-the-art system. There are not millions of those things wandering around. So clearly 30,000 is far too much.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right?
Because that's people data point. It's out, it's out there, and it got tons of press. Sorry, Trent.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, and actually, I was literally on the Trosson robotics site the other day, and they sell it as a kit now because it was based on their arms and things like that. So you don't even have to necessarily assemble the bomb yourself anymore. For I think it was 31,000 or something US. You could just order it from them now, which was awesome.
Who's that?
But yeah, no, I mean that's the part, and I can't even really comment properly just because I don't. When I look at that in my perspective, I was saying like, okay, I really want to solve this problem, and I need a rig and all that, and I had to come up with 30 grand to do it. I think that's reasonable, but it's not tinkerer level. I agree. Yeah.
But you haven't done that, right? I mean, you haven't, and you're not planning to, I don't think. So what?
No.
What's you? That's a good question. Why not? Why haven't? It's a stationary one is 30,000 US plus shipping and taxes, but call it 30K, and you could put it together, and you could be running the same demos as Stanford and have it cooking you shrimp or whatever you can come up with, but you've not done it. Why not?
No. Yeah, it's a really good question. Why not?
No, I mean, I think 30K is way too much, right? I do see, because we are working not only with automotive, we are working together with smaller and medium-sized companies, and you do see that 20K, 30K is big, right? And when you're looking around at your friends, so a new mobile phone can cost up to 1,500 euros, right? So people spending that money easily, but they're using it every single day, and you can use it for calling and for working and for entertainment. So there's so many things you can do with it, right? So now back to the robot. Let's say one of my guests was Chris Paxton, and he used to work for Meta, and he just announced that he's leaving Meta, and will start for I think it's I'm not 100%, but I think the name of the company is Hello Robot. So it's this telescope thing that can move, and that has kind of an arm, and Sorry?
Hello Robot is Stretch, 3rd generation now. One arm on a mobile base.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So and I think this
25.
is how much is it?
25.
Yeah. So I think this is the lowest you can go, and this is the most a thing can do, right? I'm not any of you know how much Spot is? Because I
Spot.
saw the other, yeah.
Like a Boston Dynamics Spot.
Yeah.
They're 70K.
Sorry?
70,000 for a Spot, I think. It's only used to be.
Not 100% sure. There's
But
another post.
arm and the grabber and stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, quadrupeds are used mainly for looking at things. Drones and quadrupeds can look at stuff. But I don't know. It's a really good question. Is it because they don't handle things reliably enough? They don't handle enough things reliably enough. What is still missing? That this is not out doing real work. It's a genuine question. I really want to know.
I mean, there's the different, right? If you buy a mobile phone, you just everybody can use it, right? My mother uses one, my father uses one. I mean, some use it better, some use it not as good as it. Or they're not using all the features it provides. But we are talking still about builders, and not everyone is a builder. So we're talking about a very niche product anyways. And then, as we spoke about this very often, it's not about a 3D printer. I know a lot of people that are not really deep into tech, but they have a 3D printer at home and they print certain stuff, right? But then this is just finding a cut, or maybe using a cut system, and then designing it and then printing it. It's still, let's say, you can do this on a beginner level. And if you're not designing yourself, you can download files and then you can print them. So even that is still doable. But when it comes to programming, when it comes to putting things together and making it work together, I think this is, so the amount of people, it limits the amount of people that are actually being able to do this, and not being able but interested in doing that, and then not only interested but having the money to do so, right? Because we have plenty of students that are very, very interested, but as a student, 25K is like impossible. I do know that you would work for quite a time to gather the kind of money to just test around, right? But now we are speaking about what will be the time and day when these kind of robots will be enter our homes, as you said, helping us with cooking, helping us with cleaning and these kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So, but then it just becomes, it's just those three things. It's still too expensive, it's still too difficult, and it's still not accessible enough. So when there's some threshold when they all reach some magical point, and suddenly it just becomes a thing that everybody does. So if that's really the case, then at some point it'll just suddenly happen, right? I mean, that's the argument.
Just the other day, I saw from Rodney Brooks. I saw his 3 laws of robotics. I don't know if you've seen it. I would like to read it out loud. So that's these good. Are, and he said, said that. Sorry?
To 10 years. His cycle time is 10 years from lab to application, to commercial application.
Exactly. He said that he and his company, they sold over 50 million real robots to real customer. So research robots, home cleaning robots, plant inspection robots, and his three laws of robotics are: first, the visual appearance of a robot makes a promise about what it can do and how smart it is. It needs to deliver or slightly over-deliver on that promise, or it will not be accepted. Second one, when robots and people coexist in the same space, the robot must not take away from people's agency, particularly when the robots are failing, as inevitably there will be at times. Third one, technologies for robots need 10 plus years of steady improvement beyond lab demos of the target's task to mature to low cost and to have their limitations characterized well enough that they can deliver 99.9% of the time. Every 10 more years gets another 9 in reliability. So as you guys...
And I didn't quite understand what he means by agency, actually.
Because I think a lot of people, when it comes to AI and robotics, they are frightened because it will take away their jobs, right? And just the other day, I saw someone who was cutting together very well-known figures in the AI and robotics space, cutting together their thoughts on AI and robotics and how it will replace other people, because they're trying to avoid this topic as much as they can, and will come up with the idea of filling gaps, the shortage of worker labor, the dangerous the dangerous jobs and repetitive, boring tasks that will be replaced. But there is still the fact that you do need less people with better machines. And this is something that you cannot deny. And this is something we are not there yet. And there's too many complex tasks. I see this in my daily work. As you said, a UR, for example, which you can buy for 20K, has just one arm. And in your facility, in your plant, in your manufacturing side, you don't have a one-arm worker, right? You do have a two-arm worker. You have the ABB-UB, which I think was a failure in the big picture. But you do a very simple task is you're assembling a thing, right? So you're taking some things out of one box and a few things on the other box, and they just put them together. You just have one arm, so you can't do the task. So you do need either two robots, and then they need to work together, and that already makes it much more complex than just putting like a pick and place or bin picking task, right? And yeah, I think it is still the fact that at the moment tasks are way too complex and robots are not good enough. But there will be some time in the future where this will be happening.
Yeah. So when they're simultaneously capable enough, cheap enough, and accessible enough, then they're going to be everywhere, right? I mean, that's the kind of inescapable conclusion that I always come back to. But then the question is, why is that wrong? What am I missing that means that's not going to be the case? So, like in driverless cars, so what the arguments we always come back to is very circular. But they're not yet capable enough, they're not yet cheap enough, they're not yet accessible enough. When those things are no longer true, is it therefore inevitable that we're going to see a lot of these things around, or are there some problems that we're overlooking in our enthusiasm for robotics? So things like people just don't like them, people will resist them, like the saboteurs maybe. Will that reoccur? Will there be a backlash against it? Hello, anyone?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, and I would like to, because I mean, I obviously like to hear the sound of my voice, but I would like to hear Trent's opinion about things.
So hard to say. I mean, I agree. It's hard to imagine. I think that's why everybody's here, is it's hard to imagine that if tomorrow, if tomorrow you could go buy a usable, useful robot companion that could help with tasks or do work for you, or in a fairly reliable manner,
or rent
I
them.
can't imagine that wouldn't be a popular product. You know what I mean? For me, the question's always this, it's not if but when. And then the when part is tricky though, because that's sort of been my thread lately, and we had that conversation offline as well, which is like, one thing that is a little bit daunting right now is if you ask the when question, or you're trying to solve a specific task. Okay, I want to, where were humanoids really at 10 years ago? Or I see this, we use the laundry folding example. Okay, so there's this laundry folding example that comes up as a thing that robots, would be helpful at. I agree. I mean, I think if you could make a laundry robot, Samsung or, all the others would be all over that, immediately. You'd just be millions of those things. But you roll back and like, if you even just go to YouTube and you start, querying or searching for these things, you can kind of find the history, right? Where you go back and you're like, oh, geez, there's a laundry folding robot from 6 years ago. There's a laundry folding robot from 14 years ago, and we did that exercise the other day. And that's the part that makes me a little bit nervous, or makes me feel like it's difficult to predict what the arc of this is. Like, I think the outcome is clear. We can imagine a future where there's robots that are helpful and they do all these meaningful tasks. And I just don't think you can argue that wouldn't be popular and wouldn't be important to the way the world works. but it's much harder to answer the when question, and I think that's the risk here, is that it's easy enough to show glimpses of this stuff starting to work, or applications for it that would make a lot of sense. But it's that, you know, that 10 years, that it's really interesting, that notion of 10 years to add a 9 to the reliability, right? Because that is kind of the game, right? Where it's like, okay, so we've got, and again, I would back up too, like if any of this was about to happen imminently, I think we would already have really crude, unsafe demos of humanoid, you know, autonomously folding clothes or something like that. Right now, we kind of got these things that pop up that might be teleoperated, that might be somewhat trained, that might, you know, it's ambiguous. It's a 30-second clip that shows
Lots of
one
video.
shirt being folded or whatever, right? You know, and so that people get excited about that. But I would argue that if any of that was imminent, like imminent, this is going to be available in the next 3 years, there'd already be dozens of robots crudely folding things, you know, in an unsafe way that just needed to be tuned up and be ready to go. And then you could argue that over the next 3 years, we're going to tune that up so it's safe to happen in a household, and have all the safeguards and stuff in place so that it doesn't try to fold a cat. And then
Exhausting. That's for having a driver, having someone responsible for each robot. Because yeah, the high level stuff is definitely an issue. But what occurred to me as you were saying that is Sanctuary dropped their first demos of automatic function within days or hours of Figure doing its demo with the Apple. But clearly they had that ready to go, and I know that for a fact. I'm sure you do as well. But you know, they were holding back. So there's definitely this this aspect that people are not showing what they can really do. And maybe there's decent financial reasons for that. They always told me it was the narrative was done to maximize their investability rather than showing what they were capable of. So it could just, I always expect to wake up and there will be headlines that, you know, ironing robots are here and they are just doing stuff, but it hasn't happened yet. But who knows how to predict it remains the question. Well, I guess my solution to actively trying to solve it by doing the open source low cost approach and just getting out to loads of people, we'll find out because we're the ones doing the experiments. That's how I want to tackle it. I want to actively try and make it go faster to find the answer to that question.
I mean, a friend of mine, he said that he's not on Twitter anymore because he doesn't like Elon, and he now is trying to convince me to enter another platform. But when I'm looking at my feed, which is much different from my LinkedIn feed, is there's a lot of builder, there's a lot of people that are working in robotics, there's a lot of things that they're working on, and weekly or daily I see very interesting demos, I see open source projects, I see data release, I see video release. Last week I saw something from Alexander Koch, who did folding, I think it was teleoperating as well, and he released the code to it. I think the arm itself is just 200, but with the other one, I think the entire setup is like a grand. And coming back to open source robotics, because this is how we came together, right? I saw a video of the DexHand. You guys are in the middle of releasing, I think there's a waiting list at the moment, a wait list, and people and universities can approach you guys where you are trying to come up with a new version of it, much better hardware. But as you said before, there is still the software part, right, that needs to be solved. And when we're looking at companies like Figure raising 675 million, why is there so much money on the table? It's because there's a promising, right? I think on the website of Figure, they have a master plan, how many years, and they are playing with the figures. Unintended. There's what kind of workforce do you have in the entire world, right? And how much work labor is still needed in so many different industries. And so this is a promising, it's much bigger than cars, right? Because I'm living in Berlin, I don't need a car, but I could definitely use someone doing my laundry and cleaning my kitchen and all those things, right? I have parents, so there's a need for someone who's taking care of elder people, right? There's so many things that where it actually makes necessary or sense to have a humanoid. And I think one of the ideas that you guys had, or that Rob had, when coming back to the humanoid open source topic, wouldn't it be good if this is not within only in commercial hands, and so only for use cases where it makes money? You were mentioning Samsung, Trent. It would be easy for them to sell a machine that is doing cooking or that is folding the laundry or whatsoever. But
not easy, because they have the launches, and those are not commercial products yet. Any more than a Mamoli kitchen is. There's still something holding it back. There's still some.
No, I mean, the idea of having those kind of fully working humanoids accessible not only in the hands of companies where they can dictate who can get them, versus open source where everybody can work on something and maybe coming up with an idea, with a final product that is available to almost everyone and that is affordable almost to everyone. And yeah, I would like to hear you guys' opinion about, do you think that the race will be decided by the commercial companies that are much more focused on can I find customers? Can I make money with this? Can I find investors spending the money until it's good enough so I can make money out of it? Or will open source be able to overtake them?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think so. My belief is this. I think that those, the big companies and the folks that have kind of like, raised a bunch of money and declared their roadmap. I mean, the Figure example is a really good example. It's like you commit, you put a roadmap on the table. It sounds incredibly ambitious, but nobody can argue that if you achieved it, it wouldn't be fantastic and quite a dominant position. And then, that's the ideal scenario, or that's really the requirement, to be out there raising money and presenting yourself as that solution. What I would ask for my question, where I think that could fall over, I guess, is that also, starts the fuse on a ticking time bomb, which is that those investors that put up that cash now have an idea in their head of what your roadmap looks like. And if you start to deviate from that roadmap because of the complexity of the problem or those other things, then you've got a whole other layer of expectations to manage, and you've got to manage them well, or you'll find that your next raise and the next tranche of money that you need to unlock and stuff is just not there when you go to do it. You know what I mean? So those guys will win if they're right, if they've set the timeline correctly, and AI is going to catch up and they're going to be able to embody it and create these robots that are intelligent and all that kind of stuff, loosely within the timeframes they've specified, or at least show enough progress in those timeframes that it keeps the dream alive. I think they've got the advantage. I would think that with open source is basically, so I had a friend use this analogy with me once, and I think it's actually a really, really good one. An initiative like that, if you look at it evolution from an evolutionary perspective, a company like Figure is a T-Rex. Open source is mammals. And open source is going to have the advantage of being able to evolve over the next billion years. Well, the T-Rex may long be extinct if it didn't manage to, dominate the environment. And I think that's the scenario. So I don't think it's an if, and I just don't think the whole thing is predicated on the AI thing entirely working, at which point the T-Rex will kind of eat everybody up and, be the king of the jungle. If that doesn't happen, the T-Rex will run out of food.
Are not fully commercial. That's the crazy thing in this, right? But they've open sourced Grok, and they've open sourced Llama. I can't remember all the names of them. But yeah, they shouldn't be open source, but they are, because they're commercial developments. And that to me really kind of pushes back against that narrative. But it stops it being such a clear-cut thing, because you can access the absolute best in AI open source for very little cost.
True.
And that's really weird. I don't think that's happened before in technological development, right? Because that's not how it's financed.
Yeah, no, it is weird, and that behavior is interesting too, because I think you have the people who like are on these primary paths where they define AI, either as their product or is very, very key to their product. So your open AIs and Google to a degree, and those folks, like, AIs are existential to their development. Then you have these disruptors that just have the resources to be disruptive, and so you've got Meta in there, who, it's questionable why they're doing it. Are they doing it because they truly believe that this stuff should be open sourced and shared? I think partially they do. Are they also doing it to disrupt the business model of Microsoft and OpenAI and Google? I think there's also an argument for that too. And so it is an interesting time. And again, it's the question mark goes back to, though, whether that, like, is that AI going to be sufficient to bring these humanoids or other types of robots to life and stuff. If it is, that'll happen, and yeah, that'll be the key to unlocking it. If it's not, if we're still, if this is not, so here's the thing I would argue, or the question mark I would raise, at least, is like, right now we're kind of operating under the assumption that increased investment in sort of the AI and the generative models and the other things that we're doing today extrapolate out to provide the solutions to these problems. Yet we're not entirely sure that those types of technologies, reinforcement learning and the kind of LLM thing and generative AI, we're not necessarily sure that those are good general solutions to, like, problem solving, planning, and some of the other inputs that are required to solve all of these problems. So, like, we could also get to a point too where this investment sort of kind of starts to top out, or hits the point of diminishing returns, but we still haven't cracked the nut to have intelligence happening at the higher level to make the decisions and stuff that happen. And so if we get ourselves into that situation, then I guess the question is, what does that market look like? And are people still interested in robots? Maybe we get to the end of the curve of what an LLM or what the current planning sort of hierarchies can do, and the robots still aren't terribly smart. Are we willing to double down? Are the investors willing to double down to see the rest of that through? Or do they sort of lose interest and we go back into a bit of another winter on this stuff? I don't know.
This came to me the other night because I was thinking about this, and it led me to Marvin the Paranoid Android. This is Hitchhiker's Guide territory. How smart do we really want them to be? If you say clean that car and it just cleans it, and you have to check it every once in a while, it hasn't done something stupid, and you have to tell it specific things, is that preferable to something where you can just say, run this business for me? Do we really want them that smart? So that might kind of fall out by contact through the market, through the general masses. In that scenario, then I think the big companies will struggle, because then they won't have that clear-cut advantage where you can just turn over huge amounts of work to them. They just get on with it. If people have to stay tightly coupled to the systems, then that works, I think, better towards the open source. So as you were talking, what it made me think is that you're going to have both. Clearly, open source is a thing. It's not going away. So as you move forwards, you're going to head towards a market which is dominated by the large corporations because you can solve these big problems, or one which is dominated by smaller systems because you can't. And maybe that will be how it goes, and maybe it'll go back and forth, and there'll be a new breakthrough, and then there'll be the quantum cloud computer, which can suddenly, yes, it's smart enough to know when it's about to make a serious mistake, and so that extra 9%, 0.999 goes on, and then it's really safe enough to use in airports and critical areas and all sorts of stuff, and then the corporates will win. So maybe it'll go back and forth a few times. It's going to be fun. I think you can speculate about as much as you want, but we're just going to wade into it and see what happens.
I mean, there's a lot of speculation at the moment, right? There's a lot of what if, but let's go back to the things that are happening at the moment between the two of you guys or within your teams. Is there a roadmap on the DexHand? Is there development that you guys would like to share? Where are you standing? Because I'm a huge fan of the project. We haven't spoken in a while. There's a lot of things happening in my life, and you guys were so keen to catch up with me, and so I would like to give you guys a second to talk about your open source project, about your little baby.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about it maybe from the put on my project manager hat, because that's sort of one of the roles I wear. So there's kind of 2 or 3 things that I'll comment on, and I'll definitely turn it over to Rob too, because it's his vision, his ideas, the sort of creator of it is very, very important. From like, in terms of status roadmap, things that are happening, I mean, there's 3 broad areas that we're working on. And I mean, I think what I would say is that if there's a lesson being learned right now, it's, you know, I think the phrase "the devil's in the details" gets repeated like on a daily basis kind of thing, where you get into something and you're like, oh boy, this is the thing. 3 broad areas going on. Obviously, the hand itself. We've been working on companion humanoid arm that attaches to the hand, and there's reasons for that we can talk about. And then the third thing is sort of control and teleoperation. So we've been doing some experiments with VR and with gloves and that type of thing, because we kind of want to answer the question, what's this hand for and how do you use it? In a general research context, the idea being, what most people, and so the other thing that I have right now, which is quite nice, is like I'm the guy that responds to the emails and the form coming through, the contact form coming through the website. So I get all kinds of interesting requests. I was gonna say crazy. Not all of them are crazy. Some of them are crazy, but a lot of it's pretty good. And there's broad categories of things. And one of the big broad categories coming from sort of the reinforcement learning, sort of hardcore research crowd is really, they're interested in really, really low level control of the motors and the hardware, and just having direct access to be able to, hook the hand and the inputs and outputs up to different models and algorithms and stuff that they develop. So that's actually almost kind of one of the easier ones to solve, in the sense that the ask is, hey, we want low level access to the hand. And so we're working on that and building firmware and stuff that will make that, relatively easy to do. But from there, we really kind of fork into this whole, the past half hour or whatever, we've just been talking about all these different things. All these questions come up for the hand as well, which is like, okay, so other than hardcore reinforcement learning, sort of machine learning type research, what's this thing for? What would be an application? And that's where you do get into these things like, okay, well, what would a teleoperation rig look like that could control the hand? What would a software layer be? Because if you go into a different segment, if you go into another vertical of people that contact us about the hand, there are people that are looking to apply it to solve problems. Hey, I've got this problem. I'm trying to do this assembly thing, or I'm trying to build this stuff or whatever. Obviously, that's a bit of a leap for us, but it makes us ask the question of what are the steps in order to be able to get there, to facilitate these solutions for these folks. And one of the easiest things to do out of the gate would be to have some sort of teleoperation style rig where they could almost define macros and create a process for doing basic work. I want to stack, or I want to do this repetitive thing, or I want to train to do these tasks, all that kind of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of things that all kind of like spin around like that, and you have to choose what path you're on. And so our primary path at the moment is to make sure that we've always envisioned the hand, and especially the V2 hand, as a research tool. The V1 hand is available, that you can download it, you can build it, you can do anything you want to it. That's out there. The V2 hand, the first priority for it is to be a really, really useful research tool. Then we're looking at these other applications, but it really is a question of sort of resources and where you apply your time and how much of this you can all do concurrently versus when you need to focus. But it's a feedback loop, because if you don't consider the ultimate applications and other things you might want to do with it, you can easily design yourself into a corner, or to overly constrain yourself into a local minima and then have it only useful for one very specific thing. So it's a challenge. There's definitely a lot of different things going on. We've got a number of people that have kind of jumped up and offered their skills and their talents to help us work on the project and push some of these different arenas forward. So we've got electrical engineering, we've got software, we've got mechanical, we've got the integration of all the stuff. So it's all happening, but it's it's a big soup of things going on all at any given moment in time. And hardware is hard. Yeah, and then there's of course just the just the very, very basic, like, you know, you're assembling things, we're putting them together, we're trying to think about how to do this more efficiently, we're finding faults and finding things that, you know, we need to work through as we go. So there's a lot of really conventional iteration stuff going on, as well as like strategic iteration on why. The why is a big question.
Yeah, that's I guess a good summing up. No, for me, the hand is always, we're aiming a bit higher up the curve, and that's a reasonable thing to do. If you look at the development of almost any technologies, then you have to be aiming higher up than where you're presently, where the market presently is. That brings the time question in again, of course. From my perspective, I like that the hand is drawing in researchers because I want access to that software. I want the capabilities. So particularly when we work on open source projects with people, then whatever they come up with, we can use ourselves. So to make that system more capable and to have better understanding of what's going to be possible to answer these questions about where is it going to go, that to me is what the hand is most useful for. One day I think it will be a common product, but when remains the question.
I mean, as Trent mentioned before, with the VC money coming in and having a roadmap and then sticking to certain milestones to convince people to keep the money pouring until you reach a certain stage where all the investment comes back to you. I'm very interested in how you guys will manage to, as you said, now you have access to people who are interested in the hand, and you might need to incorporate them because, I mean, even you guys have a lot of experience and a lot of skills. It can never be a two-man show, right? No big invention on this earth had ever been a single-man show. So it always, as you said, it's building on top of the knowledge of other people's work, body of work, right? And here, open source is just about that, right? Using more than one smart mind to solve a lot of problems, and preferably using a lot of smart minds to solve a lot of very difficult problems. And I hope you guys will be able to, because you guys are not raising, or do you? Because if so, please let me know. I'm trying to be involved as much as I can, because it's always a question of resources. I'm working for a startup. I do know what it means to locating certain amount or restrictions of resources towards a customer, right? And so it is hard to have just 2 engineers. It's hard to have just 4 engineers. You would like to have more engineers, but then who's going to pay for them? And do I need more sales guys to sell more system to then afford more engineers? So I really would like to understand, how do you make usage of that access trend that you have at the moment throughout the contact form that people are getting in touch with you?
Well, yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I mean, there's a couple things in there. One is like, to raise or not to raise, or to try build a business around this. I mean, I think we'd love to see that. What I personally haven't figured out, or can't quite see through, if I look at the, you know, the kind of gamut of contact forms and interest that's come through, are there many of them, or, you know, I guess ratio wise, are there many of them where the people are obviously well capitalized and would be willing to spend a lot of money on tools like this? The smaller percentage, you know, I would say 2% of maybe the contacts come through are from like either a corporate or a large institute. A lot of it's coming through individual researchers and stuff like that may be at an institution that can, you know, has some budget for R&D, for hardware, or they have a project, or they're working on a paper or something that has a reasonable amount of funding towards it. So you look at that. So I mean, because the question mark is going to be, so if you went to try raise money, you know, if you put on your more conventional VC hat, you know, the question mark would be, you know, what's your addressable market look like, and then what kind of revenue would you generate from that market? And you'd want to see some sort of curve that would indicate that this is, you know, has the potential to grow, and to grow quite quickly, ideally. And I would say, I mean, I haven't seen great evidence of that at the moment, because the interest is early, is from individuals. Even if you walk through the sort of sales process of explaining, like, one thing that we're proposing with the version 2 hand is we've got a service model where it's like, hey, you basically pay for the service to subscribe to this hand, because if you're actually, if you're actually experienced with this and you actually think it through and you're like, okay, I'm going to start doing pretty active R&D using this robot humanoid hand. I really need to not be down for more than a few days at a time if the hand breaks, or I have a crash or rip a finger off, whatever, whatever could happen in doing real world testing. Even at that point, even at that sort of basic threshold where you would think that somebody looking at this would be like, well, yeah, what does it cost me to keep this thing running? You do see a fair amount of pushback from a fair amount of the prospective customers who are already like, no, I just want to buy the thing. I just want to buy the thing and I want it to work. And to me, that says like, oh, geez, like, you're not actually in the robot R&D experimentation mindset at all. Because my question, it's funny, like in my shop and stuff with machine tools and everything else like that, my question is never like, how, please guarantee to me this thing's not going to break. My question is, who do I call when it needs service, and how much does that cost me? And do you have an extended warranty? Because I know that machines break. I know that, and so the reason I'm saying all this is my general gut feel in responding to the inbound requests and stuff right now is that we definitely are in early days of understanding what it even looks like to deploy systems like these, let alone to kind of maintain them or get them through an R&D cycle and all that other type of stuff. Some of the institutions and the people coming from the bigger US schools and stuff that have hands-on experience with these robots are very clear, and they understand that. They're like, look, yeah, how does it work? How do we get 2 or 3 of these? Because we need to hot swap them every time they break down. We get it. Trust me, we get it. What's your UPS account so I can send this thing back? For everybody else, though, we're not even there yet. So anyway, my point being that if you try to look at this as a consumer product, or as like something that would be fundable or VC fundable or all that kind of stuff, it's not going to be a comfortable fit. You're very much on the edge of like, it's a niche market. Only certain people are going to be willing to pay, a certain amount of money to use this tool for research and whatnot. And so it's very, very difficult. So my underlying, or my underpinning assumption, if somebody wants to come and talk about investing and proving me wrong, I'm happy to have that conversation. But my underlying assumption is that this has to grow relatively organically, and these things have to be serviceable, potentially by end users. And you're definitely back more into that open source, open accessible sort of way of looking at this, as opposed to it being a product that you would, I think, very easily or maybe at all be able to go fund and raise money around and try to build up. You just have a hard time explaining what your addressable market size is. Like, what's the TAM on this? I don't know. It's pretty small
as it stands.
I mean, there's a reason why OpenAI is not open anymore, right? So it's not not an NGO anymore. It is for profit, right? Because things are expensive, things are hard. You do need to make money out of it. And I don't know exactly the numbers, but as you can see, this collaboration now with Figure, for example, is one step. Just today I read that you don't need an account anymore to use it, right? There's other players in the market entering the game, and compute time is still very expensive, and the amount of data you need to train those models are very expensive. You mentioning before, it might be smaller ones that are faster, cheaper, and doing the specific job, versus one thing that can does it all. I mean, it seems like we're going out of this session with more questions than with answers. I'm very happy that you guys are still.
World.
Sorry?
Welcome to my world. Lots of questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that there is progress,
rather than expecting to get any answers. But that's definitely my conclusion.
Yeah. I mean, time will tell, and I hope this little chat among us will inspire a few people to reach out to you. I do think, because I spoke to a lot of people that are working on similar or different projects that can be a combination of things, and it would be great to see an open source humanoid that is accessible to people, and
That's
that
my that's what I'm planning to work on next.
yeah,
So
I hope I will see this coming alive before the paid ones, the commercial ones take over.
I think so. I think that's how it will begin, simply because they're more accessible and they're lower cost, and the fact that they can't do as much is not such a massive problem, because that will be the task, to get them to do more things. So you're just coming out in a different direction. But long term, who wins out overall? I think it's all still to be played for. And regardless, frankly, it's such an enormous market. From my perspective, it doesn't really make any odds. If I end up making really specialized, gold-plated, diamond-encrusted, super rarefied robots which serve as receptionists in the most prestigious hotels, and that's what I do as my kind of niche career, that sounds fine to me. Or if I end up having produced billions of robots and made a huge impact, that's all. Yeah, it's all good from my perspective.
Is there a milestone that you guys have in? Because when I'm talking with customers, I'm always thinking about, okay, so this is the end. This is where you guys would like to. So this is what we consider a successful project, right? You do need to have some KPIs that are at the very end, in the conclusion meeting. You can say, okay, check, 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 check. We reached all those all those things that we wanted to reach in a POC or in a real project when you deploy. But what are the milestones that are bringing you that can ensure that you're reaching the final target, right? So until the milestone, there's some daily tasks that need to be done to reach those milestones, right? So this is what you do. You have the big thing, and then you put it into eatable chunks and digestible chunks. So is there something that you guys have in mind for reaching this year? So where you can say, okay, this was successful, or this is something that we hadn't planned that we would like to reach?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, there's two answers to that. My joke answer would be, well, we want to ship hands by February, but that was a couple months ago. So then we had to come up with a better plan. So the better plan, I think, looks like this, which is there's kind of probably key deliveries and then a couple stretch goals. So key delivery is that R&D product will be done, and so that's sort of foundation is the V2, the DexHand, ready for use in these R&D scenarios with low-level control drivers, and basically what's been asked for by the research community. That I don't feel is too far off. Like, that's going to be anywhere from 1 to 3 months, let's say. It depends how many more iterations we need to see through.
We're done.
To feel
I'll build it. It's finished. The design's done. That's it. No more iterations.
Yeah, we're not. That's what we've kind of had to do. So we don't want to mess with anything recreationally anymore, but we may still discover some things. So we'll see how that goes. But like it's there. The firmware is underway, all that kind of stuff. The arm is sort of the next piece of it. So Rob's in his Hope project has had a humanoid arm that he's been demoing for a while. We'd like to have that. So one of the questions that comes up a lot, is, and this is actually an interesting one. Like, can I put this on the end of an Aloha arm or something like that? And the question or the answer to that is tricky, because these hands are pretty big and pretty heavy and stuff like that. And that's the other thing that we didn't even talk about today. But like, a whole lot of the demos and everything that's happening right now is actually happening with very lightweight arms and hardware, and it's not powerful enough to be swinging around hands and everything else. So that's a whole other category of mechanical stuff that needs to get figured out in the robotics, experimentation spaces, how to do this safely and effectively, and have powerful enough controls and arms and everything else to make these systems work as a whole. That's a different topic. So we do have a reference design for an humanoid arm that I think we'd really like to have available for those scenarios, though, where someone says, look, I really want to build a bimanual rig and I want 2 hands and 2 arms. What does that look like? Because there's a couple ways that could go. One could be like, okay, well, we have a version of the hand that's compatible with, you know, UR3s or something like that. I think we definitely want to do that on our roadmap. But then that means that a bimanual rig with a couple of UR3s and a couple hands and everything, you're pushing into the 80K range, you know, pretty quickly. That's a pretty expensive thing. So what's the alternative to that? Well, it'd be great if they could go on the end of Aloha arms. Well, but Aloha, you know, arms have maybe a 1 kilogram payload or something like that. So that's not really going to work. So we are actively trying to find that solution for what does the bimanual rig that allows you to kind of take the next step forward in terms of R&D with this product look like. I'd like to see that before the end of the year, if we can do it, or at least be far enough along to talk about what's hard about that. And then, you know, and then this whole notion of control and everything like that. And I think our perspective on that is that this is really where also the open source sort of starts to kick in too, which is, you know, a package that has the hand simulation stuff. So, you know, similar to what we did with the V1, where there's some ROS controls, there's open source, you know, ways to integrate with the hand, to do different, like all those things. All that stuff needs to evolve. That's kind of a wild card, is like, once we've got this thing up and running, we got the research hand running, what kind of cool demos and packages and stuff can we actually layer on top of this and release it for people to learn from? That part's variable. So, I mean, I think top priority, obviously getting the hand done, then the arms. Then once we've got those rigs for ourselves to experiment with, if we do cool things with software and all that, then that'll definitely get released.
And you've also spoken with Hugging Face as well, right? So we're both speaking to them, and there's a lot of interest there. So I think when we're looking at partnerships and collaborations and opening it up and seeing where it goes, and then you're mixing in all sorts of factors. So predicting that is just is clearly impossible. So yeah, it's a bit build it, and they will come kind of energy. But you know,
I will definitely. I will definitely. Sorry.
I was going to say, you're either trying something or nothing, so we're going to try something and see what happens.
I mean, you obviously need to come up with something, because people don't have any imagination at all, right? You always need to show something, so there's a reason why demos are necessary. No, I'm saying that when I will publish this episode, I will tag a few people, because I'm very interested in how will be as you said, this is open source it's not done by one person, right? This is the idea. So we give you something, and then let's see what you can make out of it. And we give you some basic, fully functional things, right? But in the very end, you need to make something out of it, and you do need the community. You do need the brain power of many to make it really work, to enter the next level, and to see what will be possible after that.
Bertrand Russell, the only thing that will redeem mankind is cooperation. That's from a Guinness extra cold beer, Matt. But nonetheless, that's the plan.
I hope that you guys will be showing me some videos. The rendering I saw the last time we spoke to each other were very fine, very nice looking. So I'm very curious to see the physical components coming to reality, come to real life, and then maybe this is my first episode with 3 people, and let's see, maybe we can make a meetup happening in the future, not today or tomorrow, because Trent is living way too far from us, Rob. But as you said, Rob, it might be possible that we see each other in the not too far future.
Yes, actually, I'll be doing some trade fairs in Germany quite soon, so there we go.
Guys, your day is still about to begin, Trent. Rob, thanks for being there, and talk to you guys soon. And hopefully, we'll have the timeline. How do you say this? Sticking to the you guys will be able to stick to the timeline. February is February. I'm very happy that you took the time.
That was always a little ambitious, but no, there has been solid progress. What more can you ask for?
You do need, as you said before, you do need to have a vision. You do need to be being ambitious, right? And Figure is very ambitious, and I think Elian is now talking about having reaching level 5 for 5 years now, I think. So, yeah, you do need to be ambitious, but you guys doing great progress, and yeah, I'm very thankful that you guys keeping me in the loop or keeping us in the loop, and looking forward to holding a DexHand 2 in my own hands.
Okay, we'll come and visit you in
Awesome.
no.
Take care.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cheers.